Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. I am so thrilled you're here today because we're going to be looking at something most of us, honestly, never think about until it's way too late. We're looking at Fair Oaks, California, but not just as this beautiful place to live. We're actually going to examine it as a really fascinating, real-world case study in home science, environmental geography, and professional restoration. When you mix aging infrastructure with some very specific local weather patterns, you end up with this entirely hidden world of scientific remediation happening right behind the drywall. So, let's get right to it.
Okay, let's dive into our roadmap for today. We are going to start with the Fair Oaks perfect storm. Then we'll look at the most common culprits causing the damage and walk through the rigorous three-phase restoration process. After that, we'll examine the actual science of drying and finally wrap things up with timelines, costs, and insurance.
Section 1. The Fair Oaks Perfect Storm. To truly get what's going on with water damage here, we have to look at how the area was built and exactly what it was built on. There's this unique clash happening between the 1960s and 70s infrastructure, those big mature tree roots the area is known for, and a really specific local environment. It basically creates a continuous seasonal tug-of-war underground. During the winter, neighborhoods, especially those around Hazel and Madison Avenues, get hit with heavy rain. But the ground there, it's primarily this slow-draining clay soil, so the water literally has nowhere to go. It just pools up against foundations and seeps into crawl spaces. And then, summer arrives. The hot, dry months cause that exact same clay soil to shrink, expand, and contract. This constant shifting puts immense physical stress on aging plumbing connections and foundation seals. It's basically a relentless, year-round environmental stress test on every single home in the area. And as if the soil wasn't enough to deal with, we've got the air itself. For properties situated near the American River Canyon, there's a hyper-local geographical challenge, and that's higher ambient humidity. Now, if you have a leak, this humidity actively fights against the natural drying process. The air is already holding onto moisture, which means the water trapped in your floors or your walls is going to stay there a lot longer, and that dramatically increases the risk of structural damage if it isn't handled scientifically. Section 2. Common water damage culprits. So how is this water actually getting in? Well, a lot of homes in Fair Oaks still rely on original water heaters installed decades ago, and when they finally fail, they can suddenly dump 40 to 50 gallons of water straight into a garage or a living space. But you know what the really sneaky culprit is? The 1960s and 70s cast iron drain lines and galvanized supply pipes. Over decades, these things just corrode from the inside out. They develop these microscopic pinhole leaks that can spray water inside a closed wall cavity for weeks before anyone even notices. Add in winter roof leaks around older chimneys and skylights, plus that slow-draining clay soil we just talked about, and you essentially have multiple fronts where water's trying to invade the home. 60. When that water intrusion happens, 60 is the most important number in the world. That's 60 minutes. Because water spreads incredibly fast, top-tier restoration crews aim for a strict 60-minute emergency response time in Fair Oaks. Every single minute that ticks by allows water to migrate further into subfloors and wick right up into adjacent drywall. Stopping that spread within the first hour is absolutely critical to minimizing structural loss.
And here is exactly why that speed is so crucial. 24 to 48. It takes only 24 to 48 hours for dangerous microbial mold to start growing in wet building materials. The clock literally starts ticking the second a pipe bursts. If you wait even just a day to make a phone call, the fundamental chemistry of your home's framework has already started to change.
Section 3. Three-phase restoration process. When the crisis hits, professionals come in and replace the total chaos of a flood with a calm, highly methodical, three-phase scientific process. I mean, this isn't just about throwing down some towels. There is a strict, linear progression that has to happen. Step 1 is assessment and extraction. Technicians use these massive truck-mounted extractors that can pull out thousands of gallons of standing water every hour. And that's huge, because every gallon extracted is a gallon that doesn't have to be evaporated later. Step 2 is controlled structural drying, which is where the heavy environmental engineering kicks in. And finally, Step 3 is cleanup and complete restoration, which is all about returning the property to its pre-loss condition. You really cannot skip or combine these steps without seriously compromising the structure. And you might be wondering, who actually makes the rules for this process?
Enter the ICRC. That's the Institute of Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification. They are the governing body of the entire industry. In fact, insurance companies recognize ICRC credentials as the ultimate proof of professional competence. It means certified technicians aren't just guessing. They are rigorously trained in psychrometry, structural drawing, and contamination control to execute these exact science-backed standards.
Section 4. The Science of Drying.
Okay, this is where we look at the specialized tools and the physics used to actually save a waterlogged property. It's pure environmental science in action. Professional restorers use psychrometric calculations to understand the precise relationship between air, humidity, and temperature in your specific home. They use thermal imaging cameras to spot temperature differentials because, naturally, wet spots behind a wall are going to be cooler than dry spots. Then they combine this with pin-type and non-invasive moisture meters to map out a precise moisture map of the damage. They aren't relying on their eyes. They're relying entirely on data to dictate exactly where commercial dehumidifiers and high-velocity air movers need to be placed. And the stakes for getting this right? They're legally mandated. The California Health and Safety Code specifically dictates that if water damage affects just 2 or more square feet, strict notification, containment, and work practices must be followed. It is that serious. Certified teams have to apply precise antimicrobial treatments and set up specialized containment barriers just to ensure occupant health is fully protected from dangerous microbial growth.
Section 5. Timelines, Costs, and Insurance.
Knowing that this is a highly regulated, deeply scientific process, what does that actually mean for you, the homeowner? Well, it usually leads to the most common question people ask while they're standing in a flooded hallway. How long is this really going to take? Are we talking a day? A month? So here is the reality of a proper restoration timeline. You're generally looking at 3 to 7 days for a residential project. Day 1 is your heavy emergency extraction. Days 2 through 6 are your active drying days. And remember, the equipment has to run continuously. You can't just turn off the air movers at night because they're a bit loud. They're actively manipulating the air pressure and evaporation rates 24/7. And finally, on day 7, a final moisture verification ensures the structure is scientifically dry. Keep in mind the materials matter here. Concrete dries much slower than wood framing, and if you're over near that humid American River Canyon, the timeline stretches to accommodate the slower evaporation.
Let's talk about the key variables that impact both your timeline and, of course, your wallet. Not all water damage is created equal, right? Category 1 water, say a clean supply line bursting, is going to be a lot faster and cheaper to clean up than Category 3 black water, like a sewage backup, which requires extreme biohazard protocols. Also, drying carpet is way faster than trying to save specialty hardwood floors. And when we look at insurance, sudden accidental bursts are typically covered, whereas gradual damage from a neglected pinhole leak, that might actually be denied. To make sure everything is perfectly accurate and to eliminate disputes with insurance adjusters, professionals use an industry-standard software called Xactimate to map out all these costs transparently.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this one thought. We've seen how the seasonal shifting of clay soils pulls on aging 1960s plumbing. We've seen how it takes just 24 hours for microbial life to take hold and exactly how specialized teams use thermal imaging and psychrometrics to fight it. If a microscopic pinhole leak started behind your drywall right now, how long would it take for you to notice? The hidden science is happening inside your walls every single day, whether you can see it or not. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. Stay curious, stay informed, and I will see you on the next one.